Hello everyone. I was recently informed of the Linus Tech Tips video on Linux gaming. I'm glad I was notified because there are some things that I wish to point out and also disagree with. Before we get into that though, I want to make it very clear that I think Linus Tech Tips channel is a good channel. I still gather information from it or learn from it from time to time. That video I'm seeing that's 4 days old about the motherboards, I'm definitely going to check that video once I'm done with this recording. So yes, I have nothing against it. This is just the one time where I need to point out some things and disagree with some things. That's all. So please do not take it any other way. With that said, now I want to talk about my experiences with Linux just so I'm as transparent and fair as possible. Let me tab over. Okay. I started learning Linux probably in about 2015, 2016. I started with Ubuntu. My logic with Ubuntu at the time was that if I'm going to learn something, I should try to learn something that has guides, user posts, and other things for me to learn from, or at least figure out how to correct a problem. However, it turned out to be too complicated with all that out there. I ended up giving up on Ubuntu because it was just too frustrating and it was overall not a great experience. To be fair, though, it was pretty early on. I'm sure Ubuntu's probably done a lot better now, but I don't think it will do any better than the other distributions I've tried. So after Ubuntu, I tried Linux Mint, which is up on the tabs. I still use Linux Mint to this day. I think that's a phenomenal Linux distribution for laptops that don't exactly have a lot of hardware power to go around. After Linux Mint, I eventually tried out Pop! OS, which I don't have up on here. Pop! OS definitely had some issues. The one thing I couldn't figure out, even with all of the user posts and guides, was how to turn on LAN file sharing, which is something I tend to do with my computers, just to make things a little bit easier so I don't have to get out an external hard drive or a thumb drive and do it that way. But yes, that was the one thing I could not figure out with Pop! OS at the time, and this was probably 2019, 2020, somewhere around there. Linux Mint, I started using it around 2018. So after Pop! OS, I went to Manjaro, and that's where I've been ever since. I've used Manjaro Plasma and XFCE for my different computers. I use them based on the hardware available and things of that nature. So that's kind of where I've been with my Linux experience. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. I've certainly had issues over the years that I've tried to figure out how to do certain functions that I would have normally used. I will say that out of my entire journey, Manjaro has been the easiest distribution for me to use. It's the one I've had minimal issues with. It's why I recommend it, and it's why I try to speak up about it, because I think that out of all of the distributions available in the Linux tree, if you will, I think that Manjaro has the greatest potential or the best chance for Linux gaming, more so than Pop! OS, which is the other one that is recommended for gaming. That's my experiences out of the way. So now I want to kind of talk about the Linus Tech Tips video, specifically with Linux first. In the Linus Tech Tips video, I noticed that, I'm sorry, but I've already forgotten his name. The person who's with Linus on the WLAN show, he was using Linux Mint. Now, that is right there a big mistake, because Linux Mint wasn't really meant to, well, work with OBS Studio and some of the other stuff. It doesn't have the ability to switch between Flatpak and distributions like Pop! OS and Manjaro does. So, of course, you're going to run into issues trying to do it on Linux Mint. If you're going to be doing anything with recording, streaming, or gaming, it really should be done with Manjaro Plasma. Not GNOME, not XFCE, Plasma. There's a very good reason I say this. It's because I've learned from my own mistakes that Manjaro Plasma is the better of the three Manjaros. It's the least likely to have issues with Proton, which is Steam's software for Linux gaming, and it's the least likely to have issues with OBS Studio. Now, I will be fair to both Linus and his partner, or workmate, I'm not sure which of the two words you want to use for that, that it's likely not something that you would know without having to stumble through Linux. You know, Linux really is the same as life. It's trial and error. That's the only way you're ever going to figure things out. So I think that it was a little bit early for them to start saying a lot of this stuff, but we'll get more into that a bit later. The other mistake that I think was made was how Linus kind of worded things. In some ways, I could see it as somebody taking it as, oh, Linux is a hard operating system to use, and we don't really need that stereotype to be persisting. It really is not that hard if you use the right distribution and you don't try to do overly complicated things like using a Go XLR, like what Linus was doing. If you just use a USB microphone, analog or USB headsets for gaming and streaming, and you don't try to do anything like that, or if you don't try to do anything super complicated, I can guarantee you Manjaro Plasma will work out of the box. It has for me for years. I've been gaming on this computer. I've been gaming on one of my computers, I should say, for Manjaro Plasma, because this is my recording computer, but my other one does Manjaro Plasma gaming. And I've been doing it with barely any issues. I can recall of maybe 2 games where I had to do some file manipulations, Proton tricks to be specific, and I think I had to copy in some files to repair a file or something like that, but it was 2 times that I had to do that in the entirety that I've been using Manjaro Plasma. It's been smooth sailing for the most part. The only times that I've ever had a super complicated issue was because of something that I was doing. And we can get into that a bit later. But my point is, I think that Linus failed to acknowledge that what he was doing was above and beyond what the normal person was trying to do. And I think that that should have been made more clear. I'll get into the Go XLR now, because I made a comment about that. So, to properly relay my thoughts on this, I need to talk about the two-way street of audio. That's what I like to call it. When it comes to streaming, you have to understand that the audio is 2 ways. And actually, let me tab over for this. In prior recordings, I did make mention of, or at least pointed out, that motherboards have different audio chips. Realtek ALC887 is the budget audio chip. 1200 and 1220 are going to be more of your high-end, or higher-end audio solutions, the ones that you want for gaming. So if somebody has a Realtek ALC887, their experience is going to be much different if they were to jump to 1200. So the other thing, too, that will affect your experience with audio is the headset you're using with it. Because if you're using analog headsets, right, a Sennheiser GSP 300 is going to sound a lot differently than some Microsoft headset, right? It's because they're built differently. So you can plug in any number of headsets or audio devices with a Realtek ALC887, but what makes the difference is that jump going from 1200 to 1220. That's just one part of the user experience, though, in terms of changing the audio solution. The other part of the solution is on the streamer side of things. So the user can take control by making sure they have good headsets with a good audio chip. But the streamer can take control by just using a good microphone. I've done some reading to try to figure out which microphones are considered the best right now for podcast streaming and other things. So out of all the reviews I've read, They seem to think that the Blue Yeti Snowball is your best starter. However, it would seem that people have said the Blue Yeti Snowball tends to pick up way too much background noise, which is a fair comment. I have noticed that with certain streams that do use that. That's completely fair and legitimate complaint to have. So if you can't use a Blue Yeti, then there are two other solutions. Let me show you. Here's the Roccat Torch. This was in one of the reviews I read. They said that this is a very good microphone for the cost. It's $100 US. So it's not going to be that much more than a Blue Yeti. A Blue Yeti sits at around maybe $70, give or take, I guess. So only about 30 more than a Blue Yeti. Your other solution is this one. Samsung Technologies G Pro. This is another USB microphone other than the Torch that is very good according to reviews. If you're using one of these two, you should be perfectly fine on Manjaro Plasma. But if you try to do anything like using an XLR mic or Go XLR, you will definitely run into issues. Capture cards are another place where you'll run into issues if you attempt that. You do have to use very specific devices. The EVGA XR1 is an example of that. That is the USB plug-and-play capture device that apparently works with Linux. I haven't personally tested it, and I haven't seen any of the major channels like Linus Tech Tips test it, but according to EVGA themselves and user reports, it does work on Linux. But anyways, moving on. Okay, the next thing I want to address is the hardware, or peripherals, I should say. Well, software / peripherals. Another thing I noticed in the Linus Tech Tips videos is he was talking about not having the software for the mouse or keyboard. There is certainly a workaround for this too. I have picked Roccat specifically because this is the gaming mice that I choose to use pretty consistently since 2016. As a matter of fact, on my current gaming computer, I have a Roccat Kova from 2016, and I still use it. The reason I bring this up is because of the DPI button. You'll notice that it's marked here, but on my mouse it's not. It's an older mouse. It's just a black button sitting next to the mouse wheel. So I have a DPI button that I could tap on while I'm gaming to change the DPI at any time. I don't need software for that because it's built into the memory. Roccat continues to make mice like that, and you can see one right here, which is the, what is that? Kane 200 AMO. The Kane 200 AMO's DPI button, unlike mine, is clearly marked, so you know where it is. If you were to use something like that, you would be able to get around changing the DPI to a certain degree. As far as being aware of the battery on your mouse, Manjaro Plasma should do that automatically. If it doesn't do it automatically, then it's pretty easy to make a mental note or just be aware of your battery levels. Most gaming mice and keyboards that are wireless have around 8 hours of life. If you manage to find one that uses normal batteries and not one that's built in, like AA or AAA, then what you can do is you can buy a rechargeable version of that and then just say, well, it's been 8 hours, let me eject this, put a new one in, and I'll recharge that one while that one's in use. That's another workaround that you can use. I do recommend that you do it that way anyways because rechargeable batteries are a little bit better on the environment than the lithium-ion batteries used in some of the wireless mice. That's just because they last a lot longer and it takes longer for them to be recycled or the need to be recycled, I should say. You would be doing the environmental solid if you did that way. And I do hope that going forward, all wireless keyboard and mice use common batteries and have a DPI button right on them. That would be phenomenal because that would fix a lot of issues. That out of the way, I just want to bring up one more topic here. I brought this up in past recordings, and I just want to bring it up real quickly again to kind of remind people that Linux gaming in general is going pretty far. Steam's supporting it, NVIDIA's supporting it, and then as of September this year, Easy Anti-Cheat decided to join the bunch. Easy Anti-Cheat, specifically in this blog post, does say that it's as simple as flipping the switch in their dev panel, which means that the game developer has to flip on that switch in the dev panel in order for that particular game to work with Linux. It's a very simple fix. It's just a matter of people asking for it, because a game developer is likely not going to turn this on until someone asks. Oh, actually, you know what? No, I'm sorry. One other topic I'm going to bring up on Linux gaming in general. I think this is another thing that really needed to be said, not just in the Linus Tech Tip videos, but any guide or post related to Linux gaming. That's going to be, it's as hard as you make it. What you want to do to avoid your problems with Linux gaming is to not use multiple monitors and use a single drive. These are actually two issues that do pop up if you read the Proton user reports. There are times where games will bug out on Linux gaming because of two monitors and because of two drives. That's why I recommend that if you're doing gaming and streaming with Linux, well, Manjaro Plasma specifically, that you do have another PC to back it up. Knowing that Linux can work really on most computers out there, what you could do is you could bring out a old computer from storage and install some sort of Linux distribution on it, and then use that to monitor your chat and other things. That would be a real easy fix. If that's not possible, then I would recommend a Raspberry Pi 4, which you can find for around $55 for the 8GB RAM version. The Raspberry Pi will do all the chat monitoring for you because it's just using Firefox. It's real simple. You can do all that for $55, assuming that you don't find an inflated price on it, but I'm sure those prices will return to normal next year. So, yeah, just make it easy on yourself. Don't try Go XLR. Don't do anything other than out-of-the-box settings, plus or minus Proton, and you're fine. I assure you. I have been doing this for a while. I recommend it. That's all I have to say. Thanks for listening.